Good.
Great, okay, cool. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Driving Sustainability, How to Influence for Impact. I'm really lucky to have Natalie and Tim from Imaginal with us today. My name's Sophia White. As she said, I'm a sustainability advisor for Toitū Envirocare, and I've got Natalie and Tim. Natalie, if you'd like to introduce yourself briefly first, and then Tim can go.
I had to find the unmute button first. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Natalie. I started Imaginal about 4 years ago while I was still doing a lot of other things. But my background is in environmental law originally, but I've been in sustainability for 20 odd, longer than I care to admit, actually. And yeah, teamed up 2 years ago with David, and just recently Tim joined our team. So pretty excited about that. Tim, do you want to say hi quick as well?
Hey, yeah, kia ora, everyone. Tim here. So yeah, wear a couple of hats. So I have my own business, Grow Good, which is all about sort of purpose and B Corp and scaling impact. And pretty recently, the last couple of months, really just around the COVID lockdown period, teaming up with Natalie and trying to bring a 20-year plus career in sales and business development and the use of tools of influence and deploy those as a force for good for people trying to navigate and help people come on the journey of doing more good in the world. So yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited. This is going to be a fantastic webinar. So before we get stuck into it, quick poll. I'm just doing a bit of a check-in. How's everyone doing? Are you feeling inspired? Are you working hard? Are you feeling tired? Or do you need a break? Again, I actually can't see the results of this, so she might have to help me and just read them out.
We'll just give it another second for all the polls to come in.
Yeah.
Brilliant. There you go. So if you can see the results, 45% are feeling inspired, 17% are working hard, 26% are feeling tired, and 11% need a break.
Oh, well, 45% feeling inspired. That is awesome. And everyone else, keep going, working hard, great. If you need a break, ski holidays, it's the season. That was just a little check-in. So a quick refresh on the SDGs. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are a global framework through which a lot of organizations, governments, parts of civil society are using to articulate ambitions towards sustainability and transitioning from business to a business of the future. Toitū have been doing a few webinars on the SDGs just to support our members and the wider community in driving sustainability. So there are 17 goals, and they are for people, planet, and prosperity. A great way to look at the SDGs is this wedding cake model, and it shows how the economy actually sits within society, which sits within the biosphere, our environment. And there's that famous quote about, if you think the economy is the most important thing, try counting your money whilst holding your breath. And so our environment really is the most important, and then we have society and then the economy. And then the thread throughout is goal 17, which is that partnerships for the goals. So what do the SDGs mean for businesses? Well, corporate social responsibility should really be supporting the global sustainable development agenda. Of course, it's not the responsibility of one single business to achieve global sustainable development, but it's really important for businesses to recognize what it is that they need to take corporate social responsibility for, recognize what impact they're having on their stakeholders and how they can improve that impact, make changes, and actually contribute and help achieve these goals by the year 2030, ideally. So another poll, just quickly. Do you think your organization could do more to integrate sustainability into business as usual? The answers are yes, there is much work to do at my organization. Yes, my organization recognizes sustainability, but there is still some work to do. Or somewhat, my organization has become aligning, has started aligning to sustainability. Sorry, that's my poor English there. Or finally, no, my organization has made sustainability core to business. And I'll get support from you, Ash, again in letting me know when they've been completed
Yep.
and reading out the answers.
Give it another second or two.
Yeah.
And there we go. So 27% say there's much work to do in my organization. 37% say my organization recognizes sustainability, but there's still some work to do. 25% say my organization is aligning with sustainability values, and 10% say no, my organization has made sustainability core to business as usual.
That's awesome. I think that's like a very typical split across businesses kind of almost worldwide, is that there are people who haven't yet recognized what sustainability means for their organization or how they can contribute towards it, and then there are businesses that are starting to do some work and businesses that are actually aligning to sustainability. So that's awesome that we've got people who've already got sustainability core to their business, and I'm sure from this webinar there'll be heaps of tips and tricks that will help every single one of you who are champions across your organizations. So bringing others along on your sustainability journey. One of the key concepts that Toitū has whenever we work with clients is the sphere of influence, and how we help businesses recognize what stakeholders or activities they have that are either within their sphere of control, their sphere of influence, or the sphere of concern. And once you start to recognize what stakeholders and activities are within these spheres, you can start to be really strategic about how you make an impact and what is kind of within grasps. So I'm really looking forward today, because we've got Natalie and Tim who are going to be talking about influence for impact, and that's really important for bringing others along with you on your sustainability journey. As champions, we can't just do it alone, and having these extra skills are super useful. As I said earlier, Toitū has ran a few webinars in the past, and they're all available on our website for you to watch anytime and also share with your teams or your wider community. A few months ago, we had behavioural changes for sustainability success with the Unite, and way back in February, I did a Supercharge Your Sustainability Strategy webinar, and then following that, we had an NZ health sector focused one as well. So please feel free to watch those again or watch them for the first time and share with others. So final poll, how effective is your organisation at collaborating with partners for greater impact? Do you think not effective, somewhat effective, fairly effective, or very effective?
Give it another couple of seconds. Right, so 19% say not effective, 45% say somewhat effective, 26% say fairly effective, and 10% say very effective.
Awesome. We need to get those very effective people to give us some handy hints and tips as well. But no, this is again, yeah, fairly typical, and I think this webinar is going to give everyone something to work with going forward. So as I just said, as sustainability champions, we need to have a lot of tools, methodologies, tips and tricks in our toolkit to achieve sustainability by the year 2030. So the using the power of influence, this webinar today is just another awesome tool in that toolkit. Finally, if you are interested in finding out more about how Toitū can support you on your sustainability journey, please get in touch with either myself or Sean O'Flaherty, and our contact details are on the screen there. And finally, without further ado, I'll hand over to Natalie and Tim. I'm super excited to hear what they've got to share. So I'll just stop there and over to you two.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And I will turn the screen share on. With a bit of luck, it's always the scary moment right now. Can you
Success.
all see? Hey, all right. So for the 37% of you that were either needing a break or feeling tired, I can just all invite you to like raise your arms, do a bit of a stretch and get your energy up. So I promise we'll move through this quickly and with a bit of energy so you don't fall asleep here going along. Now, for the 64% of you who said that there's more work to do around spreading sustainability through your organization and beyond, that's what today is about. And I'll give you a tiny bit of background why we are even talking about this. And it's actually got to do with my own story a little bit, because I was, like I said earlier, I was working in sustainability 25 odd years, and through my entire career, starting in environmental law, going into sustainability strategy, corporate responsibility, going into community, into training, wherever I went, I found that change was slow. And it seemed like we were constantly pushing water uphill, often within an environment that was not exactly receptive. And a few years ago, I actually quit. I burnt out and I was going to turn my back on sustainability and retrained as a coach. Now, funny enough, as it happened, what I found was that a lot of the tools I was learning were giving me the answers to the problems I couldn't solve before. So this topic is really close to my heart and dear to my heart. And what it's all about is, Sophia, you just had it on your slide beautifully, is about that sliver of influence. So from our circle of control, the things that we can do ourselves, we want to spread into that circle of influence, and then we want to spread the circle of influence out further into our circle of concern. So we want to, that's how we increase our impact. So that's what this is all about. So we'll spend about 20 minutes together, and by the end of this time, we'll walk you through the foundations of strategic influence. And I'm using that term strategic influence quite deliberately because it's a process that we're talking about. And we'll show you how it can help you create deeper, I can't actually read the slide because this is in the way, deeper buy-in into the SDGs. We'll also show you a shift in perspective that will hopefully change how you approach conversations about impact from now on. And last but not least, we'll leave you with 3 practical things you can try, you could play with, and watch the impact that happens as a consequence. So let's dive right in. Influence, as we describe it or define it, is the ability to lead people to persuade themselves. So that is different, and this is one of the resistances that people have. They feel like, oh, I'm trying to, when I try to influence people, I'm somehow manipulating them, or I'm somehow, you know, it's some weird form of mind control, and it is to a degree. But at the end of the day, we can only lead change if we can get people to persuade themselves. They actually need to believe, they need to make a change within themselves, and that's what we mean when we talk about a change of hearts and minds. So this is not something that people are sort of pressured into agreeing with, and then they turn around and they go, oh, actually I didn't really want this, or actually you know, I'm not going to sign on the dotted line, those sorts of things. It's actually about creating that deep change. So yeah, it's a little bit like Yoda teaching the Jedi to use the Force for influence, if you like. So how does that actually work? Strategic influence, as we define it, as we talk about it, is a process, I said earlier, and the process has different elements. And I'll just run you through the principles that we're looking at here. So the first step is strategy, and strategy means we become very, very strategic about influence, in the sense of who are we needing to shift, what do we want them to do, what do we want them to decide, and then figuring out how we can achieve that. So oftentimes when I was working in sustainability, there was a lot of talk about how to create behavior change in people. And there's a whole lot of different strategies, a lot that's been explored about that. But within an organization, the situation is a little bit different. We can't really gamify our initiatives necessarily to get the CEO to really buy into our sustainability strategy. It's more of a one-on-one. It's more of a direct relationship. So figuring out who needs to do what and how can we get them to do that. So that's the strategic part. But the strategy would be useless if we haven't got the skills or the persona to deliver it well. One of the foundations of influence is the famous, you may have heard about this, the know, like, and trust. We need to get people to know us, like us, and trust us. So that's got to do with how we show up. That's got to do with leadership. That's got to do with who we are. The best strategy, if not delivered by the right person, may still fail. Then there's the tools and skills that Sophia talked about. So those are the technical aspects of influence. How do you actually influence a person? How do you actually get someone to change their minds? And there's a whole box of them, a whole box in that toolkit. But then having those skills, we also need to apply them. So we need to practice. It's a skill that is just like any skill. We need to practice, we need to perfect all the time, and we need to tweak until we can do it really well. So there's a bit of an art to that. And then the last step is receiving feedback. So once we've set our strategy, we show up as the leader we need to be, we apply all these tools and skills really well, but then we're going to wait for feedback. And oftentimes when we hear a no, we feel that it's all over, right? Somehow this hasn't worked. But Tim will confirm for you for sure, this is why we draw the parallel to sales. In sales, a no is never a no. A no is just something that we then work with to get to where we want to be. So it's the famous objections. You've come across those, Tim, haven't you?
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, that the mindset of a salesperson is a no is a not now. It's like,
that's right.
I haven't, and I think this is one of the really key things, and this is where the persona stuff is so important, is if you're not getting the results that you so desire, like maybe it is actually how you're presenting the argument, presenting the case, presenting the alignment. I was having a conversation with someone last night, and he was like, "Oh, I'm really keen to, I want to talk about the SDGs and B Corp with my CEO." And my advice was, well, do you know what the top 3 things that are keeping your CEO awake at night are? Because if you can align your strategy to what's keeping the CEO awake at night, you're going to get that synergy and that buy-in, and you'll get a yes. Whereas if it's not something that they care about and you don't present it aligned to that, it's going to be a no. So yeah, totally agree. Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you. So how do we actually apply that to sustainability? What does that actually look like? So my question to you, if you want to put some notes in the chat, what are some of the barriers to buy into the SDGs that you experience? What are some of the things that people say to you when you come to them and say, look, we need to work more against poverty, or we need to do more to increase our energy efficiency or reduce carbon emissions? What do they actually say to you? Just put some ideas in the chat and I'll see if I can see that somehow. It was there a second ago. No, it disappeared. Here we go. Let's look at the chat. Indicators data in developing country terms rather than business terms. Competing priorities. Are the priorities higher? I've heard people say it's too expensive. I've heard that too a lot as well. Too complex. Money, where do I start? Money, time, budget. Yep. Just junk between business units, competing interests, lack of communication, don't have time, too much work, can't be measured. Love it. Yep. And to tell you what, I have heard almost all of these before myself, even in, you know, in my own work. Related to business, sustainability isn't relevant, don't have time is huge, don't understand the full benefits, not a priority. Yeah, cool, thank you. That gives us I think that gives us a pretty good picture, and even if you didn't put anything in the chat now, not now, maybe later, maybe in 50 years, you'll probably, even if you didn't put anything yourself, you'll probably recognize some of these, I would say. This is all pretty common. So let's take one of these examples and just apply a little bit of strategy, and we'll see what, hopefully it'll give you an opportunity to see things a little bit differently. So what we do when we think of it in terms of strategic influence, we take something someone says. So for example, this is not our top priority, costs too much money, and we take it through the process. So for some reason I can't move my slide forward. Let's see. Hang on. Ah, here we are. That's better. So from a strategic influence point of view, we would be asking the following questions. If you're hearing, you know, we haven't got time, we haven't got enough money to implement anything around the SDGs, the first question we would ask is, who actually holds this belief? Who says this? Is it the CEO? Is it the board? And why are they important? Are they actually the people who are in the position of making a decision about this? If they're not, we may not need to worry about them, because then it's just an opinion that people are holding. So what, right? We want to focus on the people that are actually relevant, that are in the position to change, to create a change. So who holds this? Why are they important? And then we need to get really, really clear on what it is that they need to do or decide or agree to instead. So if their current point of view is that this is not a priority and we haven't got money to pay for it, what do they need to believe instead? Now, there's a whole lot of options, actually. It may seem straightforward, but there's a bunch of options. We could ask them to believe that, yes, it is a priority. We could ask them to believe that there is enough money available. We could ask them to believe that other things are less important, which is a slightly different angle. So we want to be really clear about where it actually is we want to go, right? We're starting at point A. We need to figure out exactly what we're aiming for over here on point B, basically. And then we need to figure out what is the new thing that they need to believe to make the shift. And now when I talk about belief is different from an opinion. Belief is something that sits really deep, and that kind of goes to the core of our understanding, which is what I said earlier. It's about persuading oneself. So what is a new belief that they may need in order to come to the same conclusion that you have come, meaning that this is important? And something that can help is there actually to explore your own beliefs, to figure out, well, why do I believe this? Yeah, why do I think this is so important? So that can help with that. And then last not least, it is really important to figure out how they need to feel in order to change. Now, you probably all experience this. If you are finding yourself in a heated argument, in a heated discussion, and you're starting to feel defensive, are you more likely or less likely to agree with someone holding an opinion other than yours? If you're feeling tired and exhausted, some of you are feeling tired and fatigued and feeling like they needed a break, are you going to be more or less likely to do something new, to change something radical? So feeling state is really important, and in sales you learn very early on that people buy on emotion, not on facts, right? So we need to figure out how we put people in a state that actually allows them to do what we want them to do. And a lot of that has to do with how we view how they view themselves, and with sort of status is what we say. And then we need to create that. So that's the sort of the strategic lens that we can put on this. And maybe these are some questions that you've never really asked yourself to this level of detail before. So that's something you can try and have a play with. A shift in perspective that will change how you approach conversations for impact is the invitation to look through the emotional lens. And I'd give quite typical example is that, and I see it everywhere, and I've done it myself. I found myself so many times in presentations and meetings, and I, trying to convince people by saying, from a place of, can't you see how important this is? Can't you see how, this is more important than some of your economic baselines, et cetera, et cetera. And what I was doing without knowing was that I was actually putting people in the defense, because if they admitted that I was right, it would mean that they either overlooked something earlier on, that somehow they were not as onto it, that they had missed something, all these sorts of things. And nobody likes to admit that. So if we're looking through an emotional lens, we can look at how people are, what state they're in, and we can work to putting them into a state that will allow them to change their minds. Sometimes people need more certainty, especially in this day and age with the pandemic raging. People are feeling insecure, people are worried, scared, all sorts of things coming up. And we come along and we talk about the SDGs. Maybe before we can go there, we need to actually put them into an emotional state of feeling safe, of feeling assurance before we can get to that topic. So pay attention to how someone is feeling versus what they're saying. And last not least, let's look at 3 actions that you can try immediately. Now, I see there's things popping up in the chat, and I'll have a look in a moment, and we'll go through them with the questions. But just 3 things you can do immediately to boost the support for SDGs in your organizations. Number 1 is to reframe your challenges, and that's pretty much what we've been talking about here today, is look at your problems, look at the reservations as problems of influence. So rather than feeling like you have to, you have to find the money, or you have to kind of demonstrate why reducing carbon emissions, for example, is a good idea, that's actually a no-brainer. Nobody in their right minds would agree with that the SDGs are important, and it's almost rude not to. But there are other barriers, and there are other things that people believe are getting in the way. So rather than focusing on how difficult that is, we want to reframe the challenge as a channel of influence, figuring out who believes what and what do we need them to believe instead. And if you're doing that, you will find that you're actually very much in line. This is some data from a recent Oxygen Consulting report on sustainability professionals in New Zealand, who all said that communication is the top skill needed, the most important competency in sustainability at the moment, and who all said that they're spending twice as much time influencing others than actually implementing what they're hired to implement. So reframing in terms of influence is a shift that you can make, and it makes things more solvable, much more solvable. It's much easier to think, how can I get Peter to decide whatever, versus how do I get this organization to reduce their carbon emissions? Convincing Peter is actually much easier. Number 2, second takeaway actions. most of us, when we're trying to convince others of the importance of something, most of us use the same favorite tool of ours over and over and over again. For most of us, that's like, you know, you might like to do a presentation, you might like to write a report, you might like to do very comprehensive research and write that into a white paper. We like to do the things that we're comfortable with. And for me, that was usually setting up a meeting and talking at someone. And passionate as I am, you know, I went in there, it's like, we need to do this, and when if we do this, then this becomes possible. And you know, I was getting really excited, and I was confronted with that. In terms of body language, that really kind of said it all. And what I was missing is that that's not always the most effective way of influencing. It's almost like you have this whole keyboard in front of you, and all you do is you keep hitting the same key. So expanding your tools, coming up with new creative ways of influencing. One of the first things I teach people, people come to me and they say, you know, I've been emailing them forever and I never get a reply. And it's like, have you tried calling? They go, oh, no, we don't really call in our organization. And I'm like, well, do something different, you know. So that was one of the key lessons I learned, was to just broaden my skill set in this area so that I could be more, have more variety. And there are lots and lots of things that you can, lots of resources you can find on, you know, other things you can try. And most importantly, and this again, this is a lesson that I learned very much the hard way, is that resonance is a thing. You probably all have been in the presence of someone who, you know, the type of person who's got lots of charisma, and they walk into a room and it feels like, oh, lights come on, and they are able to relate with everyone. They're just really likable people, and you just really quite like being around them. For the majority of my sustainability career, I was not that person, especially not in the organization. I was, over time, because I had been so, you know, progress was so slow and it was so frustrating. There had been so many setbacks. I was actually the negative Nancy. And I would be, you know, approaching people with a sense of kind of like a hidden anger or frustration or cynicism. Even though, of course, you know, we're all in a professional environment, so we don't really kind of let it all hang out, but it was there. And what science has shown is actually that we transfer our emotional state, even without words, even if we can't see each other, even without body language. How we show up matters. So next time you go into a conversation with someone, and even if it's a conversation you've had 5 times before and you're still not getting the response you like, and you're finding yourself getting agitated about it, just check in with yourself before you go into that conversation and find a part of yourself that can be engaging, that can be open, that can be friendly, that can be, you know, that make the light go on, essentially. And just that small shift alone is going to change the results you're getting. One of the things we often say is you cannot influence somebody while you're judging them. Just say that again, you can't influence someone while you're judging them. So that's something that we all need to work on, sort of on the inside. And that's pretty much all I wanted to share with today, hopefully giving you a little bit of a snapshot of what we're all about. If you'd like to know more, here's our contact details. And we also run a Facebook group where we talk about this stuff all the time, day in and day out, teaching people more skills. So if you'd like to join that, you'll be more than welcome.
Awesome.
Screen share.
Let's quickly chip in. There was a couple of things you said there, Natalie. The first one, I think, you know, people, you know, their life foundation is everything I know and believe to be true is true. Therefore, you come along and challenge that. That is not a conversation I want to go. And I think the next couple of months, like we might remember 3 years ago, pre-election, this is all we're going to have on social media. No, we're right, you're wrong, we're right. And everyone's shouting at each other. How many people have changed the party that they're going to vote for based on someone shouting at them on the internet? Some total of 0, I would suggest. So I think that's a really, really clear example of, you know, how you're trying to persuade people and get them to think differently about a topic. This is like a prime example. And AJ had a great comment there. They were saying, you know, unintentionally, it's difficult to juggle to get people in the right emotional state. The example I always use is, it's like asking your mum or dad for the car keys when you're a teenager. If mum and dad have come in, they've had a really bad day at work, they kind of throw their bag into the corner and they're looking really, really just grumpy and upset. If you come along and say, hey, can I have the car keys, please? You're probably going to get a no. So the example would be, you know, you see mum or dad coming in a little bit upset and you sort of go, oh, it looks like you've had a bit of a bad day. Do you want me to get you a cup of tea, or do you need a whiskey or something stronger? Like, you know, and you spend a bit of time and you say, well, tell me about it. Like, what was it that was so bad about your day? Oh, it was terrible. Well, look, I tell you what, how about I leave you in peace to watch your favorite program? In fact, look, if you could give me the car keys, I could get out of your hair for the rest of the night. Totally different positioning, much more likely to get the outcome that you want. But fundamentally the same question that you're asking. And I think that's the key thing for me. It's how you ask as much as what you ask, and doing some math.
I'm a bit worried about your teenage years now, Tim. How did that pan out for you? No, excellent comment. I totally great example. And another thing that just triggers for me to maybe point out is that the number one thing you do in order to influence is listen and tune in to where the other person's at, rather than running through your own stuff in your own head and what you're going to say. And it's actually great for introverts. I talk to a lot of people and go like, oh, I'm really introverted, I find this really hard. No, because all you need to do is listen, which is much easier than, you know, presenting and talking at people. So tuning in, totally.
Yeah, awesome. That was a fantastic presentation, Natalie and Tim. We've got about 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes. I'd really encourage any attendees to post any questions they have, either in the Q&A box or in the comment section, or like the group chat. We can answer questions from there too. So if anyone's got any questions, just throw them out there. We'll answer them.
Ed Massey had a hand up in the participants box. Whether that's intentional or not, I don't know. But if you've got a question.
Yeah, just put it in. Natalie, that quote you said at the end, you can't influence someone whilst you're judging them. I thought that was I think that's a really great key takeaway from this presentation, because that kind of links into that whole thing of when you want a decision to be made in the way that you're going, you kind of initially you kind of assume that they're probably going to say no, and then you come from a bit of a difference sometimes. So actually listening, and that way you're not judging.
Yeah, we all talk about self-fulfilling prophecies, right? And then we think, oh, maybe that's some sort of magic, but it's actually not. It's literally the vibe you send out going into the conversation of, well, you're going to reject me anyway. And the other person picks that up and they already feel defensive just from the way it's all set up.
I can't see any questions in the Q&A box, but I wonder if it's because I've got the Chrome Zoom rather than the app.
Yeah, we've got a couple in the chat section, but before we dive in, just a quick comment here. The engagement on this webinar has been excellent, you guys. Thanks to all the participants for being so active in the chat box and the Q&A. To follow on from that trend, just a quick note that we will be sending a survey questionnaire as part of the follow-up email. So would really appreciate it if you could respond to that. It really helps us deliver better webinars in the future, and really provide you value and practical tips going forward. Soph, do you want to take the questions ahead?
Let me just read one so I can see. There is another one from
so there's one from AJ. I'm noticing that often people feel intimidated by me or feel judged, even though I don't intend to be. I'm able to be completely vulnerable about my struggles. I can get past that easily. but it's not always appropriate in a business setting. Any advice?
Great question. I'll be really straight with you here, AJ. The first thing I would say to you is to actually check in with yourself and figure out, are you judging? And if there's even a tiny yes somewhere, then that's, you know, somewhere to get started to work on. This thing about vulnerability, though, and talking openly about struggles, that's a really common piece of advice that's being offered, and it can work at times. It can be useful. It's one of those tools, yes, but like you say, it's only appropriate in very limited amount of settings. What's always appropriate, though, is coming at a conversation. This is a mindset shift that helps me, so I'll pass it on to you. It's coming at a conversation from a place of curiosity. It's almost putting your Sherlock Holmes hat on. And you go in and all you want to do is find out about the other person as much as possible. You want to know what they think, what they believe, why they believe that, where they got that belief from, and whether they got the car keys when they were 15. And if you go into it with that sort of mindset, it's really difficult to remain judgmental, and it's also really difficult for to come across as sort of pushy or something if you go in with a genuine interest. So coming and, you know, asking questions, active listening, really getting into their heads, really understanding, that always makes people feel good, to feel understood. All of us crave actually being listened to, so that's a gift you can give, and that usually you know, that breaks down those barriers.
Awesome, thanks for that answer.
Sorry to quickly add to that. Like when in the sales world, and this is something like sales is the dirty word. There's like the 7 dwarves of selling. There's sleazy, there's pushy, there's like all of that. I totally get that, and that's because most people meet really bad salespeople all the time. But what the collective job we're all trying to do is the world's biggest sales job. We're trying to convince business as usual that what we all deeply care about and believe to be true actually does align with what they're trying to achieve. So it is the ultimate sales job. And I really like your framing there, Natalie, because quite often, like, when you think about it, well, when you know sales and the arts and the science of influence, but that basics of getting that alignment and asking the questions, a salesperson is actually very aligned to both a police detective and a journalist in terms of how they should be approaching things. It's that innate curiosity of, I see that you're trying to, like, you're the boss, you're the CEO, you're the board, you have a direction that you're trying to take this organization. I'm an employee of this organization. I want to help you get there more quickly or de-risk anything bad happening to us on that journey. And I can help you do that. And I saw there was a comment there, I can't see what's wrong. It's like, not being preachy. And this is something that I've been guilty of as well, trying to talk B Corp to people. It's like, why can't you see that this is the future of business? You should all be a B corporation like Toitū. Like, you must be a card-carrying idiot if you cannot see that this is the thing. But strangely enough, people don't like that.
Funny that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say another question.
Yeah, I was just reading them as well.
The one from Colleen. She says, I work with very large global companies, and the individuals I work with are very guarded. Any advice for getting deeper with this setting? So like guarded individuals in a global company, getting deeper with them. Yeah.
So again, this is one of those, you know, need more detail to really, you know, respond accurately. But one of the things that I would definitely, first is always check in with yourself. So, you know, how are you approaching them? Are you approaching them with an agenda in mind that might lead to them feeling guarded? But if that's not the case, one of the things that I often come back to is everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they have. So if the person is feeling guarded, what can we do to find out why that is the case? You know, how can we enable them to open up more? What might they need? Maybe they're feeling insecure. Maybe they're feeling under a lot of stress. You know, maybe they need that big glass of whiskey. Whatever it may be. One of the things, again, there's lots of different things you could try. One of the things that sometimes can help, if you have a reasonably functioning relationship, is to use immediacy. and just to say it straight up, hey, you know, I'm getting the sense that something is really weighing on you, or that you feel, you know, that you're that you are being guarded, whatever language you want to use that's not sort of intrusive, aggressive, and give them an opportunity to just talk about that and listen. So just naming the issue can sometimes help move things forward.
And do you think that's still, can you still have that immediacy when doing things over Zoom? Or,
Oh, absolutely.
You know, long distance? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all, Tim does that as well. We coach over Zoom, and there's very little that can't be done through a screen in terms of human
Other than a high five.
Very early on in my sales career, you know, I was focused on selling. It's like, I want to sell you the stuff that I have because I know I can help you. And I was getting no results. And actually my manager at the time was one of the best bits of advice I've had. He said, for the next 6 months, I don't want you to sell. Just go and get to know your customers. I want to see your dinner and coffee budget go through the roof. And for 6 months, all I did was have coffee and dinner meetings with potential customers and just go, hey, Sophia, who are you? I barely know you. Let's go for dinner and let me understand what you do and what your business is like, and And phenomenally enough, my sales went through the roof because people got to know me and trust me and like me. And that was, you said earlier on, like that's one of the fundamental pieces. And if you're just in a hierarchical environment where, well, you're the boss who doesn't seem to be aligned with anything I'm thinking and feeling, you've got to find that common ground. And the common ground is you're both humans, and you'll beyond that, you'll maybe both have kids, or there'll be that shared ground that you have to build that basic connection with another human, because you can't get people to see your view of the world if you don't get to know them and understand their view of the world.
So building up from that, we've got a great question from Brian. Is any specific examples tailored towards enabling businesses to embrace the SDGs, or just any sustainability initiative? Any examples from the organizations you've worked with?
We've worked with, yes, short answer is yes. We worked with Frontera last year, but every organization is in a different place, of course, and every organization is faced with different challenges. So that's where we go from generic into specific. One of their challenges was that they already had a great sustainability strategy, but they just didn't get the key people to really believe in it and to drive it to the extent that they needed to. So that's what we focused on there. But essentially, wherever you are, I see it as a very much sort of a continuum, a journey. You start somewhere and you work your way along. And sometimes that happens in small steps, sometimes that happens in leaps and bounds, but without really looking at, someone else said earlier, the culture of the organization as well, how far they've advanced with their sustainability strategy. Is this even a topic? Is this even on their list? All these sorts of things matter. And what you're referring to here in terms of being in conflict with the accountabilities for leaders, there's many, many ways in which you can address that. One of the things is what you measure, and that's what we're working on with the SDGs, is we try to measure impact, right? If you measure something, it becomes part of accountability, but only if you give feedback. So one of the things that can happen there is reporting can happen, but reporting needs to happen instantly. The feedback needs to be delivered almost instantaneously on a daily basis. So, with them getting reports at the same time every day, they're getting their SDG report put in front of them. They're going to start paying attention. So it's those sorts of things.
And building on from that as well, another example, in a webinar that I ran in February, we actually had Wellington Zoo and the Auckland District Health Board. So they'd be able to share share some examples of engaging with stakeholders to identify what those stakeholders actually cared about. And then that was kind of finding a common ground too. And a lot of some of the businesses that I've worked with, the shift towards sustainability can come from various angles. Like, have you got people in the senior leadership team that really care about employee satisfaction, about brand, about cost savings, about environmental performance? Like, all of these, actually, the same metric can be in like, okay, well, let's just reduce our carbon footprint, and you can tick all these boxes. But it's actually articulating the one initiative in those different lenses of, okay, yeah, employee satisfaction will go up because people will be happy that we're actually doing something about environmental footprint, rather than just talking about it. You know, we'll save money on electricity, etc., etc. So I highly recommend having a look at the previous webinars. Yeah, so we've run over by 6 minutes. So I think if there aren't any more questions, we'll wrap it up there. If that's okay, I'll give you like 30 seconds to maybe ask some more questions. But this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Natalie and Tim. This is going to be a fantastic resource for the whole Toitū community and the Imaginal community. So thanks again. It's been awesome.